professional wrestler has allegedly taken his annex out of the ring. He is now accused in a bank robbery, and police are searching for the suspect.
Representing that murder, death, kill gang. Representing for all his boys locked in the fucking cell, Eastern Bloc. Representing the motherfucking hate club. And you know what it is. It's MDK. The man, the king, the fucking god of this shit, Nick fucking Gage!
Nick Gage is one of the greatest deathmatch wrestlers of all time and is a certified legend in the underground wrestling scene. He has fostered a connection with fans that is so strong that they'll support him no matter what happens. In wrestling, it's very rare that you see a fan base as loyal and dedicated to a wrestler like how fans of Nick Gage are towards him, and it's not for no reason. He resonates with the fans because, number one, he's freaking awesome, and number two, his story is a story of redemption, and this strikes a chord with the fans. He has battled addiction in the form of pills and heroin, legally died in a wrestling match for 7 minutes, was homeless, robbed a bank, served about 6 years in jail, almost murdered David Arquette, and more. In essence, Nick Gage has been through a lot, but he still managed to bounce back from it all and become one of the most over underground wrestlers of all time and the king of deathmatch wrestling. This is a journey into the supremely violent and tumultuous world of Nick Gage. Nick Gage was born in New Jersey in 1980, and sadly, his father died when he was about 14 years old. Growing up, he was a fan of WCW and WWF, but he eventually lost interest in wrestling because he thought it had become corny. His interest in wrestling was sparked again during the mid-90s when ECW's notoriety was spreading throughout the wrestling world. He then got very into Japanese death matches, with Terry Funk vs Mick Foley from IWA, a match that he especially loved. The extreme aspects of ECW and Japanese deathmatch promotions like IWA and FMW were very appealing to him, and this inspired him to make a backyard wrestling promotion with his older brother, Justice Pain, in which they wrestled hardcore matches on trampolines with barbed wire surrounding the edges. Even from an early age, Nick had a sick and twisted love for Pain, as he would often bleed in these backyard matches. Eventually, him and his brother Justice Pain started training to become wrestlers under deathmatch legend John Zandig, who was the owner of one of New Jersey's rising hardcore promotions, Combat Zone Wrestling, CZW. Nick Gage was chosen as one of the stars of this promotion, and his wrestling debut was on the first ever CZW show in 1999. It was only about a month into CZW's existence when he reached the top of the promotion by winning a 20-man battle royale to become the first ever CZW World Champion. CZW was definitely inspired by ECW, and even though ECW was known for taking things too far, CZW was known for taking things further than far. CZW specialized specifically in deathmatch wrestling. In this promotion, he would go on to hold the world title a total of 5 times, and he would also go on to win the World Tag Team Championships a total of 4 times, with one reign with his brother Justice Pain. He was living the hardcore dream. He was constantly in death matches, slicing people and getting sliced up. He was so hardcore, in fact, that he was once suplexed onto flaming glass that was placed on barbed wire. Yes, you heard that right. After this, he was literally on fire. He tried to stop, drop and roll, but it didn't work, and eventually people extinguished the fire that was on him. And get this, despite all the burns that he suffered, he still continued with the match, only receiving treatment after the match. All of this increased his notoriety in the hardcore wrestling scene, and added to the growing legend that was Nick Gage. The next thing that added to his growing legend in the hardcore wrestling scene was when he legit died in a wrestling match at CZW's Tournament of Death. Yes, Nick Gage literally died at a tournament called the Tournament of Death. This day-long tournament had been running since 2002, and year by year it was proving to be the most violent tournament in wrestling. Nick Gage participated in the 8th iteration of this event in 2009. In the semi-finals of this tournament, he faced and beat now AEW superstar Jon Moxley and booked his place in the final against German deathmatch wrestler Thumbtack Jack in a 200 light tube deathmatch. In this match, Thumbtack Jack whipped him into the ropes and he fell on the light tubes in such a way that one of them stabbed him in his armpit area, and turns out the broken light tube had sliced one of his major arteries, and because of this, blood was gushing everywhere. Gage immediately walked straight to the back, and you know something's very wrong when a deathmatch wrestler walks straight to the back. While he was backstage, the medics applied pressure to the wound, all while he was begging to go back out to finish the match, but they rightfully refused his request. He literally was soaked in his own blood. That's how bad it was. Apologies for not showing the full footage. It's definitely too hard for YouTube. The Tournament of Death took place in an isolated spot, so the ER paramedics could not gain access to the event with their cars, so a helicopter had to come and airlift Nick Gage to the hospital. Right before he was loaded onto the helicopter, he lost consciousness because he had lost too much blood. He flatlined in the helicopter, and the medics tried to resuscitate him back to life. He was legally dead for 7 minutes before they resuscitated him successfully and brought him back to life. He then spent a few days in the hospital before he was released. 1 week after he literally died, he wrestled again. How insane is that? This whole incident just cemented and solidified Nick Gage's spot in deathmatch lore. Him dying and coming back to life at the Tournament of Death literally turned him into a cult hero and a hardcore urban legend. It boosted his allure a lot and proved that he was so in love with deathmatch wrestling that he was willing to even die in the ring. He was over as hell as a result of this. Sure, he was a living hardcore legend, but to deal with everything that comes with being just that, he developed a drug addiction. He first started off with pills like oxycodone and Percocet to cope with the pain, but eventually these pills started getting harder to get because of how expensive they were and how doctors were making them harder to get. Frustrated about this, he then progressed to heroin because it was cheaper, easier to access, and offered the same effects of the pills that he was popping. This put him into a black hole because all the money that he got from wrestling was going towards his nasty drug habit. His drug habit got so bad, in fact, that it was affecting his wrestling performances, and it caused him to fall out with many people in his personal life, like his brother, Justice Payne, who no longer spoke to him because of his drug habit. What made his situation even worse was when his mother passed away due to breast cancer that she had been battling for 4 years. This absolutely crushed him and caused him to spiral further into his drug addiction. The next few years were very rough for Nick Gage because he basically had no family and had a very rough drug habit that he couldn't kick. Around 2010, he was staying at his girlfriend's mom's house, and one day, her mom got sick of them and kicked them out of her house, leaving him and his girlfriend with no place to go in the freezing cold. Him and his girlfriend broke into his longtime friend Brett Lauderdale's house and slept there while Brett wasn't home. When Brett returned, he was shocked to find them and he kicked them out, rightfully so. This meant that Nick and his girlfriend were on the street. He was homeless, depressed, and drug addicted. He was at absolute rock bottom at this point, and in desperation, he went on to do something that he will regret for the rest of his life. He decided that he would rob a bank. So he walks into a bank, hands a bank teller a banknote that says, "I've got a gun, give me all your money," and the teller gave him about $3,000. With this money, him and his girlfriend went to Atlantic City to gamble and live the semi-high life because, quite honestly, $3,000 is not really a lot of money. Nick Gage knew eventually that he was going to get arrested because a day or two after the incident, the authorities already knew who he was and had his pictures plastered on newspapers. The police found out who he was immediately because he was very much identifiable from the cameras in the bank. It's ironic that he always wore a mask when he walked down to the ring before a wrestling match, but he didn't wear a mask when he was robbing a freaking bank. They literally caught him in 4K.
This is the clearest video I've ever seen. This is the most HD shit ever. This is 4K!
After 8 or 9 days on the run, he turned himself in and he later pleaded guilty to second-degree bank robbery and was sentenced to 5 years in New Jersey State Prison. He served his sentence in a murder, gang, and gun block. This was intimidating at first, but it did not break him and he pushed through. What really surprised him when he was in jail was the amount of fan mail that he received from fans telling him to keep his head up and to keep pushing. The amount of fans writing to him really inspired him to keep going. Because he had so much support, this pushed him to work out harder than ever before so that he could come out of jail as a beast, and that he did. He was released after 4 years after serving 85% of his sentence, and he was looking better than ever. Him being in jail just increased the magnitude of his legend in hardcore wrestling, and when he got out, he was bigger than he had ever been. His best friend, Brett Lauderdale, had just created a new company called Game Changer Wrestling, GCW, when Nick was in jail, and the company was growing day by day. So when Nick was released, he had a home in GCW. Even though he was free and fans loved him again, his demons were still there and he went back to doing drugs. This was not permitted because he was on parole and so trouble was looming. The police scheduled a drug test with him, and because he knew that he would fail the drug test, he asked for his best friend Brett Lauderdale's drug-free urine, and Brett gave it to him. Gage even had a device that would help him simulate peeing, but unfortunately cops caught on to the ploy that he was trying to pull, and they arrested him again for parole violation just one day before GCW was set to throw a tournament in his honor called the Nick Gage Invitational. He had just let everybody down who believed in him, and he went back to jail for almost 2 years. After he got out for the second time, he was even bigger than before, and he realized that he couldn't mess up the opportunity again and let everybody down one more time. GCW was even bigger than before, and fans were literally clamoring for some Nick Gage. Realizing how popular he was, he went ahead and created the Murder Death Kill Gang that his fans were a part of and that he was a leader of. This got super over, and he finally was living out his potential and was the biggest draw in deathmatch wrestling. All of this led to him having a match with former WCW World Heavyweight Champion and actor David Arquette. This match is still infamous for Gage almost killing Arquette by mistakenly stabbing him in the neck with a light tube. Luckily, Arquette survived this, but was really pissed off about the incident. This also just added to the lore of Nick Gage. Eventually, tragedy struck again in 2020 when his brother, that he barely talked to, Justice Payne, took his own life by jumping off a bridge. It was revealed that his brother was suffering from severe mental illness and substance abuse. This really crushed Nick because that meant that his whole family was dead at this point. This heartbreak did not stop him from continuing to be one of the rulers of the underground wrestling scene though, and he earned himself a match on All Elite Wrestling's Dynamite against wrestling legend Chris Jericho. This match was infamous for Nick using a pizza cutter on Chris Jericho's forehead and then a Domino's ad with the pizza cutter played right afterwards.
Oh no! You gotta be kidding me! When you order Domino's carry-out, get 3 topping pizzas for $7.99 each and choose
This was absolutely hilarious and became a massive meme. In 2022, Game Changer Wrestling signed Nick Gage to a multi-year exclusive contract, which was especially notable because indie promotions don't normally do exclusive contracts. This gave Nick Gage the right to finish his career on his terms. Nowadays, Nick Gage has taught his hardcore ways to Japanese women's wrestler Maki Ito, and now she's obsessed with deathmatch wrestling and cutting people with a pizza cutter. That's the effect of Nick Gage. Nick Gage's career has been tumultuous and certainly interesting. Despite all the very high highs and the very low lows that he's experienced, he's managed to bounce back and cement himself as a legend in the hardcore wrestling scene, which is only fitting for the man, the king, the god of this shit, Nick Gage. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other videos, and also please like, share, comment, and subscribe. But anyway, goodbye.